Thank you. I'm not seeing Twila at the moment, so I think we'll go ahead and switch the order for today, TAs, just so you know. And I think we'll get started with Sanket, if that sounds good. And Sanket, I know you have a presentation, so I will share my screen. And in the meantime, I would love if Cassie, you could do that introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, today we have the honor of listening to Sanket Jain, Jayan. I'm sorry about the pronunciation if that's off. Who is an independent journalist and documentary photographer based in Kolhapur, India. Sanket is also co-founder of Insight Walk, which is a nonprofit that offers teaching fellowships to rural community women. And then the women from these fellowships work together to ensure that every child in their village has access to the education of their choice. So thank you so much for joining us, Sanket. We're so grateful for your time and really excited to hear you speak.
Thank you, Sanket. Can everyone see my screen? Yeah? Okay, thank you. Go ahead. Sorry, we can't hear you. Is that just me?
No, we can't.
Yeah, for some reason we can't hear you.
Just a second, let me see what.
No, now we can. Oh, now you're gone. You're muted.
Yes, is it working now?
Yes, we're good. We're good.
Okay.
We can
Yeah,
hear you.
if at any point there is connection loss, please interrupt and please let me know. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for the introduction and for this opportunity. I'll directly take a deep dive into what I'm going to talk about today. And I'll start with a very simple question, and I'm going to end my talk with the same question itself. So the question is, what would your life look like if you got a chance to design your own syllabus? And we will try to find like what can actually happen if we start designing our own syllabus, and if we start taking our own decisions, like what can life look like? So yeah, the slide you see, these are all our fellows, Insight Walk fellows. They are all community women. None of them have graduated from any college. For some reason, they had to drop out. It's either because of casteism, because of marriage, because of gender disparity. There are thousands of reasons, and there are thousands of stories behind it. But what brings them together is a determination that, yes, we can change the education system. So yeah, next slide. So before getting into the kind of work we do, I'll just give you a brief background of the community we work with. So we are based in Western India's Maharashtra state, and the district is called Kolhapur district. We work with 4 different communities. All these communities were forcefully migrated in the early 80s and early 80s and the late 90s. So what actually happened is these communities used to stay in the forest, very close to forest, and some of them were deep inside the forest. And all of a sudden, there was a call that, okay, there will be a dam construction in the region. So all of them will be migrated forcefully. And migration in India is a very dicey topic. Most importantly, it's very controversial in nature because there is no proper policy for displacement. And most of the communities, when they are displaced, they are just thrown away like this. Like, you can go to that area tomorrow, and we are sorry, we don't have any land for you. Like, so this is one such classic scenario. Like none of the community members got any land. From the 90s, they are fighting, and till 2021, they are in the fighting stage, but none of them have received any land. So what actually happened? So if you're losing all your land, and if you're a predominantly agrarian community, your livelihood is gone. So this is what actually happened with the community. And all of a sudden, everyone was like everyone was caught in poverty. Like there is rampant poverty. All of a sudden, everyone was deemed poor. So, and today the generation we are working with, it's the third generation of the same community members, and 3 generations down the line, it's the same story: poverty, hunger, malnutrition, all such problems. So what we decided is, like, before even thinking of approaching this problem, how about we decide to learn from the community itself? Like, what do they want in the first place, and what are they actually expecting out of this? What does education mean to them? And with this question, we began rolling out a fellowship model. It's called Inside Talk Fellowship. Uh, can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So what we decided to do is, like, okay, we don't have any land, so let's pick the community land. So there is a community land, and it's not really a big amount of land. It's just a small piece of land. And what we decided is, how about cultivating vegetables on our own? Because fast forward to 2020, when there was global prevalence of lockdown. Now, lockdown in India was a disastrous policy, especially when you have 75% people living without any resources. 833 million people live in villages, and if without any resources you are deciding to shut down the country, it's not going to work, and it didn't work out. Millions of people lost their jobs, and so did our community members. Like all the kids and all the parents of the kids, they lost their jobs. Everyone was deemed jobless within a day. Within a day of the lockdown, this is not even a week. Within a day. So what kids decided is, okay, this is a big problem now, and they could sense that there will be a hunger crisis sooner or later, because since there is a lockdown, we don't have any funds. There is no way to access the vegetable market. So what are we going to do? So this was a big problem. Now, I'll rewind back to 2 years. That's around 2017, 2018, when we started fellowship model in this village. So what we decided is, first we are going to solve the food problem, because food is a problem. You don't need a lockdown, or you don't need a global disaster to see that there is a food problem. Globally, there is a massive food problem. And what we decided is that we'll start with agriculture. So what actually happened is, these kids, they went to their grandparents and they asked them, what did your community look like back then when you were not displaced? What were the kind of crops you were cultivating? How did farming look like? Did you use fertilizers, pesticides? And the grandparents had one very simple answer. They were like, none of us grew sugarcane. Now, talking about sugarcane, India is the second highest sugarcane producing country in the world. Now, there are several problems with sugarcane. It's a cash crop, it's water intensive, heavily water intensive. At a time when people are dying of thirst, when there is no drinking water, how can we even decide to divert so much of water to sugarcane? So, sugarcane is a big problem, and starting in late 60s and 70s, what happened is everyone began moving to sugarcane because it pays slightly better, not slightly, much better than normal vegetables and other crops. Now, because of sugarcane, the soil quality started degrading, lifestyle patterns started changing. There were a lot of diseases. So our students asked their grandparents, like, how did you deal with all of this? And they had one very simple answer. They were like, none of us took any crops 3 times a year. And the only thing we do is we practice organic farming. And that, I think, strike a chord with the kids. They were like, let's do this. So let's start growing our own vegetables. And let's go to the next slide. Uh, so what happened is, when they started cultivating their vegetables, initially they failed. At least for the first year, there were massive failures. Like they lost their crops. And as facilitators and mentors, what we told them, it's okay. Like even if you lose 100% of your crops, it's still fine. But for once, we'll have to learn how to get back to organic farming. And is there a way out of this? So kids were like, fair enough, let's keep practicing, let's keep experimenting. And after 1.5 years, there was massive success. Like we managed to cultivate more than 10 crops. This is the first cycle. And if you like zoom out of this, you will see that everyone is growing sugarcane. There is monocropping pattern, and these kids are doing wonderful things. They have managed to grow 10 plus crops. So this was something very inspiring for them. And now fast forward to the lockdown story, when their parents lost their jobs. So their kids were like, they went to their parents and they said, you know what? Yes, we understand you lost your job, but you don't have to worry about food. And parents were like, how? What are you going to do? So this kids told them, we have ample food in our place. Now this community place, it's called Solidarity Art Farm Museum. Solidarity, because solidarity is one thing which brings all of them together. And art farm museum, you'll get to know eventually, like when we move to next slides. So what students decided is they began distributing vegetables. Every day they would land up at one of the other community members' house and they would distribute vegetables. So this worked out pretty well. Now what happened is this model was successful, but kids knew that there will be a second, there will be a third wave of lockdown. And second wave of lockdown in India was disastrous. Like there were so many COVID cases, so many deaths. And again, same problem. There was hunger crisis, massive hunger crisis, people losing their jobs, no money, nothing. So these kids, they started distributing the vegetables again. Now, this is one solution. Now, today, proudly, all of us can see that the community is self-sufficient in food. Not just our own community, they are supporting at least 4 to 5 other communities from the nearby villages. So this is solving one of the biggest problems. Now, what happens next? Especially at a time when we are talking so much about climate crisis, climate disaster. So what does it look like in rural communities? Because sitting in an elite city or sitting from a position where you have all the powers, climate change looks nothing. It's like, okay, there will be massive rains tomorrow, there will be floods tomorrow, and there will be forest fires. So what? But no, climate change is much beyond massive rains. And with this, I'll get to the solutions part of it. Like, how can we even go about solving this? So what our students did is, in July 2021, there was massive flood in the community, and the community was flooded twice in 3 years. Now, twice in 3 years is a big deal because after floods, you lose all your resources. You pretty much lose your house. There is nothing. Where do you go back to? So our kids were like, okay, we are cultivating crops on this Solidarity Art Farm Museum, but there will be floods, and this flood is going to wipe away everything. So there is no point growing crops. We'll have to do something immediately. And so they decided that, you know what, when there is flood, there is a lot of water. How about saving that kind of water? So there we go. And these kids ended up making a mini dam. It's 2000 liters, only 2000 liters, but this is more than enough for what they want. So can we go to next slide? So these kids, they actually know how much water each crop requires. And they have a database, they have data sheets. So what they do is, for example, there is coriander, and coriander requires 100 ml of water on this day, on this particular day. So they worked out the math and they were like, 2000 liters is more than sufficient for our Solidarity Art Farm Museum. And so after the flooding was gone, after all the disasters were over, our kids knew what comes next is a massive drought. How did they know this, that there will be a drought here? Because in 2019, when there was flood, after floods, there was massive drought for good 30 days. And whatever crops which survived the flood, they were killed by drought. So they decided that, okay, there is going to be a drought. And there was a drought this year. The calculation was right, perfect. And when there was a drought, they used the water from this dam. All the 2000 liters consumed very well, and none of the crops survived. In fact, they reported thrice the produce of what they would get in normal times. So this is how they managed to use their own education and managed to save their entire community. Now, another big problem is, how are you going to maximize your food production at a time when there is so much of violation of land rights, when your land is being grabbed by rich mighty corporates? So how do you even increase the production here? And with this, they began on the designing their own syllabus, and they figured out that how about exploring hydroponics, because hydroponics is not widely prevalent in India at this stage as it is in USA and other developed countries. And none of our kids actually knew. Like they were very intrigued to even think of not using soil to grow your crops. And they started collecting a lot of sponge. In the second photo, you can see a lot of thermocol. And so just put water in it, and they began growing a lot of crops. So this is one of the ways of maximizing production. Again, no chemicals used. It's totally organic farming. In the last photo, which you see in the same slide, you will see a girl holding a packet. This packet is actually actually car cover, once which we use in summer season to protect our cars, our automobile. And these kids are very good at hand embroidery. So they found one such cover lying around, and they were like, okay, let's just stitch this. And you will see multiple pockets in the same sheet. So in every pocket, they have grown a crop. I don't have the latest picture right now, but everything is covered with crops. And in the last photo, you can see a big blue colored sheet. So this sheet is around 30 feet. So this is 30 feet hand embroidery work, 30 feet of car cover converted into something interesting, which helps them grow crops now. So this is one of the reasons why there was a massive food production. Yeah, next slide. Yes. Now another thing is like since there is a lot of climate change, there's a climate disaster going on, and there are massive rains. So how do you protect your crops? Because if you're going with multi-cropping system, you have to take care of every crop. Now this year 2021, they made a record for themselves. They cultivated 25 crops. Ambitious goal, very difficult to execute. They knew all of it. And obviously, one of the questions which the kids themselves raised was, what if it starts raining suddenly in summer season? How are we going to protect these crops? And that's when they started exploring, started finding solutions, and they came up with a simple idea: life-saving umbrellas. So what these umbrellas do, they are made up of waste plastic sheets and metallic sheets. Just pick a metal sheet, make a cone out of it, attach a stick to it, and mount it in the ground. So you have the list of crops. Like, okay, grounder doesn't require much water today. Like today, I don't want my spinach to get any kind of rains. Like any kind of, if it gets rain, it's going to die. Just mount this umbrella, and the moment water falls on this umbrella, all the water is diverted to the nearby crop. And what is the nearby crop? The nearby crop is a water guzzling crop. So it's very simple. Your problem is solved. So whatever rains you are getting, you just divert it. So this is one of the ways they manage to protect their crops. Next slide. Yes. Now, another important question is when you tell kids, when you give them the freedom to design their own syllabus, not everyone will be interested in farming. And that's completely fine. Not everyone should be interested in farming. So whatever kids, one of the kids was like, one of our kids is not one, there are few kids, the bunch of kids who are pretty much interested in wildlife. Like they want to just study plants and animals. And you will never find these kids in schools. They never go to schools. They are just away for weeks they're just away from the community. And none of us know where they are. And after a week, they will meet us and they tell us, you know what, I saw this animal in the jungle. I was there and it was real fun. So that sounded really incredible to us. So what we decided is, okay, you're not interested in farming. So let's do something about it. So these kids, they came up with the idea. How about making an art installation of Vulture? Now, why Vulture? Because Vulture has gone extinct in the district. It's very simple. So where are all the vultures now? This was one of the questions our kids asked. And they pointed this question to me, where are all the vultures? So I asked them, yes, where are all the vultures? I don't have an answer to your question. And the kids were like, even we don't have an answer. So let's do one thing. Let's start traveling the entire district, length and breadth of district, and figure out what's happening to vultures. And they ended up digging an entire literature through their interviews, and finally they figured out that what has happened to vulture and why it has gone extinct, and they could draw connections with other countries as well. Like vultures are going extinct in several countries. So they made this simple art installation. Now this is not a normal art installation just to make some awareness. That's not the point. The point is, in the first photo you can see there are several climbers. These are different types of vegetables. Now vegetables require space to grow, especially climbers. You have to install support systems in the field. So instead of going with conventional sticks, what this kid decided is, let's just put up a vulture out there. Now every community member is going to see this and they will be like, why vulture? Because vulture has gone extinct. And that's how you create awareness and make everyone aware that, you know what, it's high time we start thinking about wildlife, because millions of animals and birds are on the verge of extinction. So this is another problem being solved using trash. Now this involves a lot of trash, only trash. And that's how they went about it. Next slide. Yeah, you can see back like how Vulture acts as a support system, and obviously plants growing. Yeah, next slide. Yes. Now another thing, since our kids design their own syllabus, so we have the privilege to witness a lot of incredible things. And a few kids were like, one particular kid who came up with the vulture idea. This kid, he pointed out to me that I want to become a wildlife conservationist, but at the same time I want to document whatever I'm seeing in forest with hand embroidery. Can we do something about it? I was like, you yourself have told me the answer. Like we can do a lot of things about it. And this kid, he goes on to inspire his entire classroom. And there are at least 5 or 6 people who picked up hand embroidery full time. Now, what these kids do is they spend throughout the day, they are out in the community, they are talking to people, observing animals, birds, just in their own world. And when they come back, they start making sketches out of this and they begin hand embroidery. Yeah, next slide.
Sanket, just to make you aware, you have about 5 minutes left.
Yes,
and I'll
yes,
tell you
yes.
in 1 minute.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so this is hand embroidery artwork. Now, a kid who is in grade 5, 12-year-old, 13-year-old kid, you don't expect that kid to be patient enough to learn new things or just to stay at one place. But this kid, this 13-year-old kid, he spent 200 hours making this hand embroidery artwork. So that's the power that's the kind of work kids do when you give them the freedom. Yeah, next slide. Yes. Now, again, these are animals which were found in the pre-displaced community and the post-displaced community. There's a stark difference. There were more than 100 animals and birds in previous community, and then in new community, there are less than 20. Yeah. Next. Again, since they love doing a lot of artwork and science work, so that's how they began learning the basics of chalk carving, and now they document their community by chalk carving. And this is an incredible archive in the making. What these kids are doing is they're just talking to senior farmers and asking them like, what were the traditional farming tools? Some of them are in fact writing books on this. It's in the making. But yeah, this is some of what their research looks like, and all of this is made by them. Yeah, next slide. Yes, another major problem worldwide is how much gender aspect is considered when your syllabus is designed. Because when we study climate crisis impacts women and children the worst, more than the men and other community members. The simple reason behind this is women do 70% of farming in India, and they don't have land rights. Less than 10% of women have land in their own name. So there is something that has gone massively wrong. How do you even think of correcting this? The first step is acknowledging that, hey, something is massively wrong. And that's how our students began documenting life of women farmers. So there are a couple of students who just talk to women farmers throughout the day. What does their life look like? Where is the gender aspect kicking in? Like, what are the problems you face as a woman? And these are just some of the results which we see. Next slide. Yes, this artwork is made on walnut shells. Very delicate artwork and very difficult to do because painting on walnut is not easy, not at all easy. And there was a topic there. I mean, it's still a part of a much larger research. They're researching about what does life of a woman look like in a lockdown, because there was a shadow pandemic in India where women were facing a lot of health problems, mental health issues, and domestic violence. So the kids began documenting all of it. Next slide. Yes. Another important question is, how do you integrate science with farming? The first photo you see, these two kids, they were very concerned about. There was one question which was in their head for quite some time now. They were like, there are so many machines coming out in the market. None of us can afford it. Uh, at some point, we'll be able to afford it, hopefully. But what about several people who still won't be able to afford it? And what about disabled people? Like, even if the machines are affordable, machines never factor in disability. Like tomorrow, if I don't have two legs, if I don't have a hand, how do I farm? And if that's my only livelihood, you can't tell me that you know what, you have to shift to some other livelihood. How about making it more accessible? And that's when they designed this car. This car looks simple, but it's a phenomenal innovation. What they do is just switch on the car, and this car is a fertilizer spreader. So throughout the field, you can roll this car, and this car will spread fertilizer throughout the field. So this is one problem solved. This model works perfectly fine, and people in the community have picked up this model now. Now our kids are just working on improving its design, like studying the geography, terrain, etc. The second photo is a peanut peeler. Now, typically, peanut peeler costs around 5,000 rupees in Indian market, which should be around 60 or $70, 60 or 70 USD. This is 2 months of income for Indian farmers, like average income. You work 10 hours every day and multiply that by 2 months. After you work so much, you will get that much money. And with that, you can buy a peanut peeler. Doesn't make any sense. Our kids designed this in less than $1. It doesn't take anything. It just requires basics of science. You put the peanuts in the machine, just roll the machine manually. It doesn't even require batteries. Just roll it, one-time innovation, all your money is saved. Yeah, next slide. Yes, the first photo you see is a fire alarm. Now, fire alarms are very costly in the market, and scaling of idea of fire alarm has been very difficult for the corporates. I don't understand why. But in India, there is no proper solution for farm fires. So whatever kids decided, they just remove the starter of tube light. It's a tungsten filament, and there is a heat sensor to it. It costs less than not even $1. And they made this fire alarm. There is a fire. There's fire in the farm. This buzzer goes on, and what you will see is there is immediately there is water pouring down. So it's like artificially creating a rain in the field. Um, I am unable to show videos because of the time constraint, but if you go to our Instagram handle, everything is documented there. Or you can just DM me if you want to look at the videos. Just last minute. Uh, so second photo is a grass cutter. Now, for 60 years, imagine you're farming for 60 years, you are a community woman and you don't have any access to resources. So what do? Your back is going to break. And our kids found the same thing, that the elder woman would always say that there's a massive backache. Can you do something about this? And the kids were like, why not? Let's just make a simple grass cutter. Now this is made using blades. Again, it costs less than $2. It's very simple to make, and now they're converting it to a solar grass cutter. So yeah, it's pretty much free. After a point, it's completely free. Uh, Last innovation is very interesting. It's a washing machine. It's a portable washing machine. You can carry it anywhere you want, anywhere you want. It's solar powered. So just there is sun rays, and you can wash your mask with it. This is an important innovation because not many people want to innovate for farmers and for farm laborers. And our kids were like, we will innovate for farmers because we don't want any corporate entity to do that for us because they don't understand our context and they will do a very horrible job, which they are doing. In fact, they are doing a horrible job out there. So, so yeah, this is what your life can look like when you start designing your own syllabus. And so yeah, I started with the same question. What if you start designing your own syllabus? And this is one of the answers, like this can actually happen. So yeah, this is pretty much about it. To know more about the work, please follow us on Instagram because I have several time constraints. So yeah, so that's pretty much. Thank you. Sorry if I was way too fast in this because I had to speak a lot.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Sanket.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I will make sure to post these slides so that everybody has access to them and can look through them. They're really beautiful. Tamia, would you like to introduce our next speaker?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sanket. That was extremely inspiring. It is an honor for me now to introduce our second speaker, Twila Cassadore. She is an indigenous forager and a member of the San Carlos Apache tribe. She is also a food educator and an advocate for indigenous food sovereignty and has done so for the past 25 years. Twila interviews tribal elders to gather traditional knowledge. She takes foraging trips into the wilderness and delivers public presentations to share her research. With the Western Apache Diet Project, Twila has documented the importance of foods like grass seeds and acorn seeds to the diets of Apaches before the people were moved onto reservations and became reliant on rations and later commodities. We are so excited to hear from her today.
Oh, Twila, could you unmute?
There you go. Okay. Yes. And thank you. Ahia Ashum. My name is Twila Cassadore. I'm from the San Carlos Apache tribe again. I am a cultural project assistant for the tribe. I hope many of you was able to see the film, The Hunt. So I'm gonna share a little bit about myself. First off, I'm gonna start off with a small short summary. The summary, because our stories are told in the wintertime. So this is just a summary so people understand some of our cultural beliefs. So in our beginning, we talk about Nayinas-Gani. Nayinas-Gani is the first Apache man. And Nayinas-Gani is the son of the sun. So as Nayinas-Gani was growing up into manhood, his father showed him two worlds. One had metal, horses, pigs, cows, manufactured things, vessel, money. Then he showed him a beautiful, colorful world that had agave, acorn, berries, nuts, clean waters, beautiful green grass and trees. So he asked his father asked him, which of these worlds do you want to live on? And of course, he chose this beautiful world. And with that, his father showed him a rifle, then he showed him a bow and arrow. And both of these have very lengthy stories to each part of it. I'm just summarizing. So what his son said, I will take the bow and arrow, of course, that will help him on this world. And then he told his father, this world don't belong to us. We belong to this world, and we are going to take care of this world so this world can take care of us. And that is in our Apache creation stories. They have those belief systems. So that helps explain a little bit maybe about the film The Hunt. So with The Hunt, it's a part of how you say sovereignty. Not only sovereignty, it's a part of sustainability. It's something that's so in balance with life where people see it, they say, oh my gosh, that's a big, giant rat. And rats you cannot eat. No, this is a desert, how you say, a white throat desert wood rat. It's like one of the only species that don't carry the hantavirus that they talk about. So of course, this was something that in their own way scientifically knew that this was safer to hunt. So people hunt the desert wood rat for consumption and for strength. Not only for that, when you look at where a lot of these live at, okay, this is just one of the things that we do work on. And as you can imagine, okay, the desert wood rat lives in many of these areas. Let me find his section. And where he lives is you don't hunt near the community. You hunt out away from the community. And there's a reason why. One's trash, one is pollution, the other is a chemical. And let's see. Wait, you look here. This is a little thing about what you had seen on the video where the wood rat hunting. And so in here, this wood rat, he lives among a lot of plants that grow in our environment. Like some of these plants we cannot eat. As humans, we cannot eat. And some we can eat. One of them, they love these beautiful fruit. This is a prickly pear. Of course, he's full of thorns, but when you learn about the prickly pear, you know how to carry it and hold it. And it's something I don't recommend. Don't carry it with your bare hands because they do have thorns. The other is these beautiful green plants that grow in their deserts naturally that don't acquire much water. So you're looking at plants that are self-sustaining, that are already dealing with a harsh environment, that are still producing without agriculture, but they are maintaining themselves. So this desert wood rat, what he does is consume a lot of these plants that are growing in the landscape, and he consumes some of the plants that we cannot eat, that we will consider poisonous, but yet they're medicine. And I always feel that it filters through the animals where we're able to take care of our sickness, especially during this time of this pandemic that has been going on. That a lot of this has helped support many people by going back to those traditional foodways, the traditional medicines, and going back to collecting, because we have disconnected from our traditional way of life, within the past 150 years. And in the past 75 years, you've seen an increase of disconnection as far as the past 20 years, when drugs and all these things from social media has really impacted people's way of life and that connection towards the traditional foodways and our traditional knowledge, and the impact it has had, where it stereotypes that, oh, that's poor people's food. They could not buy food, so they label people that harvest and forage poor. Not necessarily very rich. I would say they're very rich in the knowledge and very rich in able to support themselves without an economy. And somehow through time that changed to a point where you were deemed, you were looked down on for carrying on these practices. Like wood rat hunting was one of the big ones. And when I took the young person out wood rat hunting, she went home. I know her family, so she went home to her grandmother. Her grandmother asked her many questions when I brought her home. Because, oh, where did you go? Oh, we went to this location. What did you go hunt for? And she tells her Luscha, and she goes, yeah. And she tells her, did you kill it? And then the little girl says, yeah. And then the grandmother said, did you cook it? She goes, yeah. And then the grandmother says, did you eat it? Then the little girl looked at her like, yeah, it was really good. And people have their thoughts of what this Luscha does taste like. And so what happened was, I always reference to this dusty book, you know, that been sitting on the shelf for many decades. And what grandmother did was go get the book. We used to hunt it like this. We used to cook it like this. We used to go to this place. All these memories was hidden for decades because it was deemed poor people's food. But for this young girl to open that book for her grandmother, it brought, you know, this beautiful connection of the past and present that it was beautiful just to see this communication and conversation that continued after I left, and all the many stories that are hidden. So a lot of our elders do carry a lot of stories that are silent because of what this modern world has labeled many people as poor. What people are is very rich in knowledge of how to take care of themselves without the means of an economy, but in the means of sharing that traditional knowledge of traditional foods that are growing abundantly in our communities, which we do have a large amount of plants that grow in our community. So again, I work with the Western Apache Diet Project out on the St. Carlos Apache tribe. I work with the four Western Apache tribes in our region. And what it is intense and very tedious work, about 30 years of work that they have put all together to compile information like this for community members. And I'm just gonna run through. These are plans. The first one shows the time of day. Everything is in the language, in our traditional language. When you see these stories, these calendars, they also have a summary of a small story that took place at that time. And there are many stories about our ceremony, how much has changed in our ceremony. And I love this one. This is a beautiful one. Let me find it. And how the winter time, it tells their stories. So this is information that was extracted from every interview that was conducted, whether it be through recording, whether it be sitting with them. And it wasn't easy, never easy. People ask me sometimes, you know, about the Glushcho. I grew up with it. I grew up in a time where we lived outside of the community. We hunted, we planted, we foraged. We rarely bought food. And I thought that was normal. To me, that was normal living until I went into a school system that, oh, your family must be so poor that they have to do all those things. And actually, my dad was an electrician and my mom was a very well-esteemed teacher. And she also, she just brought us up in a way that was more sufficient, in a way that she considered, how you say, considered a decent, this is how people maintain themselves. You don't spend lots of money on many materialistic items. You save money because they pay for the college, or they pay for, things that family needs. But again, back to these information, you can see we were able to compile a lot of information. They all go into the Apache, the scientific, and the English common name. And then it goes into the seasons that they are growing in. This is just the top 100 foods that we were able to put together. And there is many, many food out there. And with the information of elders and understanding the seasons was like this. And this is something that our youth were able to create work of. This is a traditional calendar. This tells us the seasons from the 4 seasons. It's not a calendar in that 12 months, but a calendar that follows the season in equal balance with life. And there are many different, also has a planting season. And it also has the stories about each of these. And these are shared with our community. And also in ensuring that our language is continued. And I always tell people we carry seeds. I always say 5 seeds: language, song, ceremony, prayer, and a traditional food waste. And in those traditional food waste, we all carry that knowledge to the next generation. How we each plan to carry it is totally up to the individual. We can't blame society so much. We can't blame this, but if we want to learn, we will learn. One of the beautiful things that was done is also the human anatomy, but it's also put into the language. And this helps maintain the language. So if anybody had any questions about the film, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Twila. Thank you for sharing those beautiful images and the calendar. And I know that the students will definitely have a lot of questions for you in just a few minutes. We're just going to hear from one more speaker, and then we'll transition into breakout rooms where you'll get time with a smaller group of students so that they can ask you questions, and we'll do that with all of the speakers. So we'll look forward to that. But in the meantime, I would love for one of the TAs to introduce Ashley, our next speaker, Ashley Ugarte.
Is that me or one of the TAs?
I'm so sorry, Judy, I forgot it's you.
Okay, thank you very much. Twila, I just want to thank you for your beautiful storytelling and your wisdom, for your teachings about how to care for ourselves through traditional knowledge, and for Sanket, your inspiration for the children to innovate in simple ways and to create tools that address needs. Our next guest brings together Sanket's question about what would life look like if you design your own syllabus, and Twila's teachings about using tradition to guide us. I met Ashley Ugarte in 2013 on her college campus in Houston, Texas. Ashley grew up Mexican, Spanish, and American, and was surrounded by traditional cooking and food culture from a very young age. Though she didn't set out to have a career in food. In fact, she started her career journey as a pre-med major at Rice University, and that is where we met. We were doing one of our Conscious College road tour stops, and she asked us if we could meet the following morning before we departed from her campus. When we met, she asked if she could come intern with us in California a couple months later when school ended for summer. She was our first official intern. Over the next few years, Ashley interned with us, and after she graduated, we hired her to work with us on our Conscious Kitchen program. Her passion for food, fresh, local, organic, equitable food was so evident. She loved everything food, talking about and sharing it, and realized that was her calling. Her next job was to be working in the kitchen of my co-founder of Conscious Kitchen. It was not just any kitchen, but a 5-star eco resort, where she quickly impressed everyone with her skills and passion, even though she'd never worked in a professional kitchen before. Flash forward, Ashley realized her true passion was pastry after working with a pastry chef at Cavallo Point. Then she saw a job ad at the Chocolatier Dandelion, a high-quality, ethically sourced cacao company, and she never looked back. Ashley is living her dream, doing what she loves, and integrating her culture and traditions into the work that she does with chocolate. My gift is that I get to be with her in her journey and witness how one's heritage, passion, purpose, and intention can guide one's journey to doing work that they love. I give you my dear friend, Ashley Ugarte.
Thank you, Judy. Every time I'm like about to tear up. Natasha, I have slides, but I can share my screen if that works better. Perfect. Okay. So. Okay, so let me know if you can see this. Okay, can everybody see? Yes.
Yep.
Or actually, Natasha, I have a question. I have notes and I just realized I can't see them. Is it easier if you share and I can have my notes on the side?
Hi, Ashley. Yeah, that would be fine. I would just need you to email me the presentation right now.
I did actually.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't see
Right.
that. Okay, I will find that right now. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Okay, just 1 second. So, perfect. Okay, I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay. Share, present. Can everyone see that okay? Perfect. Okay, thank you, Ashley. Just say next slide when you're ready.
Okay, perfect. And just had my notes, but they just closed on me. One moment. Okay. All right. So, yes, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and to share a little bit about my story and to go into more detail about my journey with cacao. Ever since meeting Judy and the Trinity family, I've just had such an incredible opportunity to dive into, things that I'm very passionate about. I've been at Dandelion Chocolate for almost 4 years now. I started as a pastry cook. I'm leading their confections department, but I think that there's been kind of a spark in me recently that has empowered me to go back to my roots and to focus on Mexican cacao. So what I'm going to start with is a little bit into detail about kind of paralleling my story with the story of cacao and where it started and where it is and where it's going. So you can go to the next slide. So I think a lot of people don't know this, but cacao cultivation dates back to Mesoamerica, which was back in the early formative period, around 2000 to 1000 BC. And the Olmec culture was probably the first to domesticate it and to create the complex process that we have for turning cacao into chocolate. There's been a lot of evidence in Olmec pottery found in sites within Mexico that have traces of theobromine that prove that the Olmecs had cacao-based beverages. So these drinks during the pre-Hispanic times were made using roasted and ground cacao, and they would add like small amounts of corn. They would add other indigenous ingredients like vanilla bean, honey, and annatto. And to these pre-Hispanic cultures, they believed that cacao was a very like highly coveted, scarce product, and they would reserve it for noble consumption, and they even used it as currency. So these pre-Hispanic cultures, the Mayans, the Olmecs, the Aztecs, cacao was just incredibly important to them. An important thing also to know is that back then, the pre-Hispanic cacao was actually not fermented at all. It was only washed, which is a term called lavado. And what I've come to find out is that that actually preserves way more of the antioxidants. So there was this traditional, natural understanding and rich knowledge of this ingredient, which I think is very important to know. Next slide, please. So fast forward to the Spanish colonization of Mesoamerica and the influence that Spain had on what people today know as chocolate and what people today think is the flavor of chocolate. So the arrival of the Spanish altered these systems and the traditional practices and production methods that the indigenous people had in place. They were the producers of cacao, the indigenous people were asked to produce beans that had been fermented because this was better suited for the European taste. They wanted cocoa drinks that were less bitter, that had like that more cocoa-y flavor. And of course, once they brought it to Europe, they started exploiting more areas of land in Central and South America, eventually going more south and actually encouraging them to grow lower quality cacao because it was faster, it was easier. But because of this, the drinks were not as good. They were actually probably terrible. So they added sugar, they added milk, and you see this evolution of how they really shaped the, how chocolate was being consumed. And of course, this drinking chocolate, the Spanish drinking chocolate, eventually influenced other Europeans to kind of use this crop in their own way. So Swiss chocolate was developed, the Dutch, alkalized cocoa powder was born. And we see this kind of, marriage of these two ingredients together, cacao and sugar, that wasn't really the intended purpose of it at the beginning. So now, next slide, please. We're here. We have the chocolate giants. We have Mars, we have Hershey's, we have Cadbury. And there's really is a bitter truth behind this chocolate that I think many of us grew up loving and indulging in on Halloween and other, times in our life. This is the stuff of children's dreams right there. But what we didn't know as children was that this chocolate is actually not chocolate at all. It's actually candy, really, because they masked, bad quality cacao with artificial ingredients. So if you were to take a Hershey's bar, there's actually not even 10% cacao content in a Hershey's bar. Why this is a problem is, I think it creates a flavor profile of chocolate that people, today think is chocolate, but it actually isn't. It's actually fake vanilla. It's, milk powder. It's a ton of sugar. And what this does, this doesn't only affect, how we perceive chocolate, but it also affects how cacao is grown. So there's, a huge, significant exploitation of child labor and farmers, especially in Ghana and the Ivory Coast, who produce over 50% of the world's cocoa. And not to mention the loss of biodiversity of all of these, heirloom varieties and the deforestation of the land in order to easily grow hybrid cacao varieties, because obviously, like very similar to other agricultural products, heirloom varieties tend to be a little bit more fragile, a little bit more delicate, but they have so much flavor. They are so unique and distinctive and floral and just beautiful. And, you know, unfortunately, in order to meet the demand, you know, especially of these large giants, there was a significant involvement in government to create hybrid clones of cacao so that they could grow wide open, you know, just wide open and without the need for very complex agricultural systems. And of course, another sad truth about this way of production is that farmers do not get a lot of the profit. The chocolate industry is an over a $100 billion industry, and only 6% of that goes to the farmers. So there's really no incentive for them to grow for flavor, to, you know, to, if they, you know, present an heirloom cacao and it's just going to be, you know, they're just going to get the same amount of money that they would for a commodity cacao. Why would they grow it? So next slide, please. So in comes, you know, the bean to bar single origin cacao movement, which happened around 2010. And Dandelion Chocolate, where I work, was one of the first single origin bean to bar companies to come onto the market. And here we have this emphasis on single origin being, you know, what distinguishes each bar of chocolate. And there was a strong focus to incentivize the farmer to grow for flavor. So in order to do this, you know, you have these companies that are very committed to transparency, to paying farmers well above commodity prices and even well above fair trade prices, because they wanted this industry to be comparable to other craft industries like wine, beer, cheese. So there was a lot of education around how just the unique terroir of a country is why you get a distinct flavor profile. And at 70% or above cacao content, where it's only cacao and it's only sugar, you cannot hide bad beans. You cannot hide, you know, poorly grown, poorly fermented beans. So there is now this huge incentives for farmers all over the world to kind of go back to the agroforestry systems, you know, of their indigenous people, or to, you know, places like, you see a big issue of this is in places like West Africa and in, you know, Southeast Asia, where chocolate isn't necessarily part of the culture. So there has to be a lot of kind of education over there to further help incentivize farmers that, hey, this is a really valuable crop. And even though, you know, maybe we don't understand how to use it here, we know that the international market, it really wants it. So next slide, please. So this brings me back to my roots and to my journey. And I think, you know, after working at Dandelion for 4 years, I started to kind of, you know, along my own journey, growing and appreciating where I came from, I started asking myself, why don't we have a Mexican origin? You know, I knew that Mexico was essentially the birthplace of chocolate. And I thought it was just so crazy that we didn't have one. And so, you know, I started doing a lot of research. I started asking, you know, dandelions, like who had been here for a very long. And I would get, you know, answers like, oh, you know, the beans are really bad. Like they're not good quality. And I thought, well, that's crazy. Like, how is that possible? So I kept researching. And I started finding out that unlike other cacao producing countries, Mexico actually consumes more cacao than it exports because it's deeply rooted in the culture. And so I said, okay, so then why isn't it being used for craft chocolate? You know, this is a smaller batch. This is not mass marketed chocolate. And I found out that the genetics of cacao are actually incredibly suitable for, you know, like the craft chocolate industry. They have a variety of heirloom, like genetic cacao called Criollo, which is known for having a very distinctive, like floral flavor. So that wasn't the reason. So then I discovered that the real difference between Mexican cacao and other cacaos is in the processing. And because of the culture, because of the traditions, dating back to Mesoamerica, most Mexican cacao is the lavado cacao, which is just washed, not fermented. It's been very hard. There've been a lot of bean to bar chocolate companies that go to Mexico. They try to install these systems of fermentation, and they just don't work. And so they say, well, we don't want this lavado cacao. It's too bitter. It doesn't meet our taste needs, right? So you have this kind of concept of the Eurocentric sentiment that we grew up realizing that chocolate tasted this way, but actually the lavado cacao, which is the natural kind of traditional process of it, is a completely different flavor, and might not match the needs of, I think, our current European centric taste buds. So I think that the difference that I discovered in Mexico with the lavado beans was really inspiring for me. I think we have this huge focus on chocolate bars and the European methods for processing chocolate, but I think what people don't realize is that there's this rich traditional knowledge that the indigenous people have from Mesoamerica to the indigenous people now in Mexico. We've ignored these stories. We've, forgotten, why were they doing this in the first place? And there was actually a study that I found that showed that lavado cacao actually has twice the antioxidants than fermented cacao does. So while the Europeans were coming in and changing it because they felt that they knew better, that the flavor was better, so they preferred it this way, that actually the indigenous people were really onto something, and they didn't even have this science. They just knew instinctively that this gives us vitality. It gives us, it makes us feel good. It's part of our rituals. It's part of our everyday. But if you don't have that connection, then it's very easy to kind of exploit that. So Mexico has not stopped drinking chocolate or using it to make moles. It's very much alive in the culture. This photo is a vendor of a Oaxacan vendor who's making a very traditional drink called the tejate, and that's using cacao. It's using corn, mami, which is like a seed, and florecito de cacao, which is actually in English says cacao flower, but it's not a flower that grows on cacao. So there's a lot, there's hundreds of these types of indigenous beverages. And, despite this though, Mexico is facing a lot of challenges right now in terms of its environmental sustainability. So in the past century, about 90% of the rainforest in southern Mexico was logged and deforested, turning this biodiversity hotspot into green deserts of pasture lands. Humid tropical lands are suffering from soil erosion, biodiversity losses, and poor productivity under pasture land management systems. And really the true issue is that agroforestry systems and products are completely undervalued because of the commodity market. And again, farmers, if they cannot make a living and if they're not incentivized, they're going to move away from these, from this work and search for a better life. So this has been something that I've just become incredibly passionate about. And I really just have learned so much, and I'm really excited to share with you guys how this relates to my story. So next slide, please.
Ashley, just so you know, you have just about 3 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So this is how it started. This is my life consuming cacao in, I would say, the most conventional ways. Abuelita in the center was my first memory of chocolate, and this is what we would drink growing up with my abuelita in Mexico. Next slide, please. This is how it's going. So this is my work at Dandelion, starting from the pastry kitchen to the single origin truffle collection, to a Valentine's Day collection, to being able to kind of turn my visions into reality. Next slide, please. This is pretty much how I got here, and this is a little clip, but I won't play the whole thing. And actually maybe we won't play it because it's very long, but this is from the movie Selena, and the father talks about how it's so hard to be Mexican American in America because you're not Mexican enough for the Mexicans, you're not American enough for the Americans, and you have to work twice as hard to kind of prove yourself. And I struggled for a very long time to accept where I came from. I was not always proud of where I came from. And, you know, I think it's funny because my mother, who is an immigrant from Mexico, she has influenced so much of my life. My father, who is Mexican American of some Spanish descent, he has the tiniest amount of Spanish, by the way. And I hooked onto that tiny little detail for so much of my life. I was so embarrassed to say I was Mexican or Latina, and I longed to be Spaniard, even though I spent most of my holidays in Mexico. I've never even been to Spain. You know, like, I think it was just that shame that stemmed from passive and active anti-Mexican, anti-Indigenous, you know, the pro-European sentiment that was all around me growing up. And so that scene, you know, really hit home for me. And I'm so grateful that, you know, much of that has changed in our society today. And now our culture is celebrated, our food, our art, you know, you see Selena and Frida everywhere. And I think that that's so amazing. So next slide, please. So where I'm going and where I hope to go with my next journey is the birth of my next project called Reina Cacao. So Reina means queen in Spanish, and that's kind of an homage to all the brilliant, strong women who've shaped my life, like my mom, like Judy, like all my, you know, the female mentors that I've cooked with. And so through Reina, you know, beyond celebrating my roots, I really hope to honor the traditions around cacao that make Mexico so special and unique, bringing back the art of drinking chocolate and educating consumers about the sophistication and culture behind these traditions. And above all, of course, I hope to promote the preservation of the diversity of native heirloom cacao by sourcing ethically and transparently and directly from farmers and paying them well above, you know, market and fair trade prices, because it's the right thing to do and because it's possible. So that's my story. And yeah, I'm super excited to share it with you. And again, thank you so much for letting me be here.
Wow, thank you so much, Ashley. That was wonderful, just to learn about your story, your work, the incredible research that you've done. And yeah, I know our students are going to have a lot of questions for you. So right now, just so that the speakers are aware, Sanket, Ashley, and Twila, what we're going to do is put you in a breakout room. In breakout rooms for 10 minutes with the students, and we'll rotate you through those breakout rooms. You will receive a message in the breakout room when you're about to be switched out. But that way you might have a bit more time to interact with smaller groups of students, and you might be able to answer more questions than you would if we were in a large group. So that's the idea there. I know that 10 minutes isn't a long amount of time, but that does mean that we will just be going 10 minutes over, but we will end right at 10 minutes over, just so everybody knows. And our students have actually said that we did a survey and they've said that they're okay to stay 10 minutes over. Okay, awesome. Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much to our speakers today. We had a wonderful time with you, and I know the breakout rooms were really short. I hope you got to answer some of the students' questions. We've just found that this format really helps us get more questions answered. So we really appreciate your time. We couldn't be more grateful, and we have learned so much from each of you. I know that your stories are going to live through this course. We're going to keep thinking and talking about all of the ideas that you've raised, the images that you've shared in your presentations. And yeah, just thank you so much.
Can I say one quick thing, just to take away actually from Sanket? If we live with the question, what do we want to do or see tomorrow? How would we go forth and take journeys in our communities that care for people and planet? And I love the wisdom that each of you gave to us today. And really, then what do we do with this brilliance that has come into our midst, and how do we respond? So thank you guys so much for everything you shared.
Thank you, everyone. And if the students have any other questions, I will send those along. Thank you. All right. And until next Saturday, everyone, feel free to send me any questions you have over email, but I'll end now since I know we're over time.